You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, to the pressing news first here in the Tuesday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and guest co-host Carter Hutton. The Hutton family got a new family dog.
We did. We did. So I am an absolute sucker. I love my wife and my kids. And so we do fostering once in a while. My wife runs a country club here at golf course. So in the winter, she's a little slow. So sometimes we foster, and we ended up, again, I don't know why we're supposed to be fostering this golf season. We had this little girl come in. Mishka was her name. And we changed it to Margot. She's in the Hutton family now. So we got 2 dogs, 2 kids, and I am maxed out, Nikki.
Yeah, I could only imagine, man. Like, that's the one thing you don't comprehend and realize. And I'll always, as a kid, I always got on my parents. I'm like, get us a dog, get us a dog, get us a dog. But the one thing you don't understand or comprehend as a kid is the expenses behind having a dog. Vet bills, food, other ailments. Like for example, 10 years ago, I was living at home still, and I guilted my parents. I pretty much said, hey, I'm buying a dog. I'm 22, 23 years old. There's nothing you can do. So I got a dog, brought her home. Who does that dog live with now, 10 years, 11 years later? My parents. And who's paying the vet bills? My parents. Who's paying for the food? My parents. So, again, I'm doing this stuff in my 20s. Imagine doing this when you're 11, 12, 13 years old. The responsibility is what gets me. Like, it had more to do with her staying with my parents because of the attachment. But I think that's the one thing you don't recognize as a kid is how much it costs to have a dog, you know?
Oh, yeah. And to have kids too, right? Like even our main dog, Harvey. So that's our big boy. He's 8. Like even the vet bill, you had to go into the vet just for like a checkup and a few things. And it's like $300. And you can't even actually in where I live now, you can't even get a vet unless you have it. So we get grandfathered in because we already have Harvey. One of my close buddies, he hadn't been to the vet in a while, like 7 years with his dog, which is crazy. He's got to drive to the States now because I think the push of COVID, everyone got dogs in my city, and there's not enough room for vets. So but I love it with my young kids, teaching them responsibility, teaching them some hacks of life, and I end up doing all the hard work, but that's okay. That's why I'm still working. That's why I'm here, Nikki.
That's true. I mean, most guys, they play in the National League. They set out in the sunset, especially when they steal a boatload of money from the Buffalo Sabres, and they just call it a life. But not you. You're with us. We're happy to have you. You talk about vets, man. Just hearing that word triggers me. You want to talk about thievery? Go to a vet. Because they claim they can talk to your dog. These vets will figure out anything. Like there's always an answer. Or let's try this. Or it's trials and tribulations with these vets. And the bill, every time we go, whether it's me going or my parents going or my dad going, it's an easy $100. And it's like, what actually happened? What did we do to better the dog's life? Not much.
Yeah. That's okay, though. It's a good racket. Maybe instead of this, maybe that's what I should have done. I should have went back to school to be a vet. Maybe that would have been my calling here. But,
man.
But it's hard to live without a dog,
how much money they're seeing the portion, but I would have to think vets in 2024 are doing pretty damn well. Like, especially this area. I live in Toronto. Everybody has a dog. It seems like everybody has a dog these days, and knowing what I know about vets, they're doing pretty damn well. And it's unfortunate because the dogs can't speak, but that drives me nuts. Nevertheless, it also makes me sick. The city of Boston win championships. I'm watching last night the NBA. It's no secret I like watching basketball a bit. And the NBA Celtics had been the day one pick. It's like equivalent to the President's Trophy winner in the NHL, going all the way and winning a Stanley Cup. That's what happened last night. They defeated the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. But that city, did you know they've won 13 championships? They've won 13 championships since the turn of the century. Like, just think about that. 13.
I know. I went to school in Lowell, Massachusetts. That's where I played in the NCAA. And the Red Sox had won a championship when I was there. And that was absolute chaos. I remember I was in Lowell, which is, a rough school to say, like more blue collar, not as like beautiful as Boston College and Boston University, those kind of places. And we had like riots with the riot police on our campus, people like hanging from trees. I remember it was just being insane. And man, do you hate, like me personally, Boston fans. Like they're just, everybody has a chip on their shoulder and they're so rude. Even at times I feel like in the local townie bars, we'd go for drinks and you'd even talk to a girl, right? We're in college, you're trying to socialize and you like talk to a chick. You'd be like, hey, can I get you a drink? You're just trying to be polite. And she'd be like, what the hell do you want? You'd be like, I'm just socializing. I thought that's why we all came to the bar. So yeah, there's definitely a chip on their shoulder. And then win again. Watching Portnoy last night smoke his cigar on his social media, and oh man, they just keep winning, and it's hard to take.
It's sickening because we're just starved for like one NHL title here. I know we got the NBA championship. I believe today's the 5-year anniversary of the Raptors winning the Larry O.B., but we're all waiting for a Stanley Cup here. And then you look conversely at the great city of Boston, I guess. The Patriots 6 titles, Red Sox 4, Celtics 2, Bruins 1. And it's like, here we go again. Every year, one of those teams ends up winning a championship. And here in Toronto, it's just so difficult. And I just think you look at the body of work of Boston, it's just year after year after year, they produce winners, and it's tough to see. And I think you transition that conversation into the Stanley Cup Final, Game 5 tonight. Nice little wrinkle, too. Jason Tatum, who plays for the Celtics, and Matthew Tkachuk are childhood friends. And on back-to-back nights, they could possibly win championships here.
It's kind of insane, right? You
Yeah.
see those photos of them from grade school, and just two. It's different if it was like both hockey players. That's kind of common, right? We talk about that GTHL team with the all the players that play in the NHL, and to have two guys that dominate in different sports that went to school together, grew up together, good friends. It's pretty wild. So it'd be insane to see him lift the trophy tonight here. So, and there's a good chance it's going to happen, right? Like at this point, I don't see this Florida Panthers team stopping. I know they got waxed last game. In my opinion, Nick, I don't know how you feel, but I think almost losing 8-1 is better. Like, it's just one of those games where, like, hey, we didn't have our stuff. It sucked. Where, like, imagine it would have been a tight game and you lost in overtime. They would have been like, oh, man, I could have did so much more. Like, what if I would have did this play? Where this is one where it's just like, throw the film out, make a few adjustments. Don't get too caught up in it. You know what you need to do. And I think that's what they're going to try to get back to here in Florida. But on the other side of it, you don't want to give this team hope either. Like, this Edmonton Oilers team can go on a run. And you see those stats after 3 losses, they've had runs. But granted, after those 3 losses, they weren't playing the Florida Panthers every game, right? So in the defense of the other statistic, because we can always cherry pick numbers, right? I feel like that's something we love to do on this side of it. And I've been there before. I used to like when they cherry pick numbers over my career so they can make it sound better. Because when I played in Buffalo, they just cherry pick all the bad ones and make me look like shit.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing when I was on NHL Network Radio. I'm like, well, his contract here was with the Blues, right? You had an outstanding contract year. I think you guys might have won the Jennings that year, really, really close. And all of a sudden, you were the #1 goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres. So things worked out.
Yeah. I'm not going to say no to the contract, right? You're never knocking a guy for getting paid. But like, and that's the first thing, like, I've always tried to be honest with that, right? Like, I played on a really good decor, right? You think the next year Binnington comes in and he wins the cup, right? Was it Binnington? Like, yes, he played well, but he was also a product of the surroundings. So, but you're not going to knock an athlete for cashing in when you can.
No, I would never knock you for such a thing. But you, again, look at Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. I was in the building as referenced yesterday in Edmonton for Game 4. It was wild. It was raucous. It was almost like a night off for the Florida Panthers. I was telling the folks sitting around me in the auxiliary press box, I think you're going to figure out quickly here early in the second period if the Florida Panthers are going to put up a fight or are they going to go quietly. I think they did a bit of both, but I thought the game was over really, really quickly. They had an opportunity to rest Sergei Bobrovsky. I was going to ask you too, like, do you think he hurt his chances of the Conn Smythe Trophy with that game? Is there anybody else in that conversation from Florida's perspective, in your opinion?
I still think, like, if he comes out and just has an absolute game tonight, I still think he is the guy.
Yeah.
But you got to consider Barkov, right? I know McDavid had a big game there, but for the most part, this guy has shut down every big player in this situation. So I still think he's the front runner in my opinion, but I'm always a bit biased, right? I feel like early in this series, he played so good to win those games, and he's been so consistent. He's been their leader, but at the same time, if like they can shut them down tonight, I think Barkov becomes in the conversation where maybe if this series gets extended to 6 or 7, possibly, and Florida wins, now I think it maybe Barkov is more in the mix than it is Bobrovsky if he lays an egg here tonight.
I feel the last couple of days, the McDavid narrative has been gaining steam. Maybe it's passing Gretzky's record, as we talked about yesterday. Do you see a pathway where Florida wins and McDavid wins the Conn Smythe? I don't know if I can do that.
No, I can't do it. I honestly, I just think that's so tough, right? I feel like you look back to J.S. Seguer winning it. I think he had a .945 save percentage, and in round 3, he gave up 1 goal with like a .992 save percentage, and it was unbelievable how well he played for that Anaheim Ducks, who had no business being in that series. So that is the one outlier. And for McDavid, yes, it's impressive, all these assists, but some of these games are blowouts. So I don't know. I just think that would be like the NHL narrative, right? The star player winning the Conn Smythe. I just think it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth, in my opinion. And it's going to be a really hard argument for me to see the team that loses in the Stanley Cup final, one of their players taking home the Conn Smythe.
By the way, the chat is on fire right now. Outside of Fazilla, who said talk about the Leafs, everybody's mentioning the name of their dogs, which is great to see. I love dog talk here on Leafs Morning Take. But pertaining to this one specifically, I'm very curious to see how the Florida Panthers come out. You mentioned it. You lose 8-1, your worst loss of the postseason. You're a very structured team. Defensively is my wonder. That's why I'm probably leaning towards the under in this game. I do think Florida's going to win the Stanley Cup tonight, but defensively, I expect a monster effort from this team. Starts with the goaltender, but starts with their big guys as well. I think it's been a relatively quiet series for Matthew Tkachuk. Barkov did not have a good game. There wasn't one single player on that Panthers roster who was good on Saturday night, which leads me to believe there's going to be a bit of a bounce back here. From Edmonton's perspective, I think just more of the same. I think you mentioned it. Like the confidence is brewing. You score 8 goals on a red-hot goalie or a red-hot team at that. I know all of them didn't come against Bobrovsky, but you're feeling pretty damn good about life heading into game 5 here.
Yeah, for sure. You're kind of at that point, like a chip in the chair too, right? Like you're down 3-0 and there's life. I feel like the pressure is eliminated in my opinion, right? Where let's just go out there and play because like no one expects us to win. Now the pressure's in Florida's corner, in my opinion, right? If they don't close this game out, now it's like we got to go back to Alberta and try to find a way to win with a team that's getting reckless. I totally agree that after an 8-1 game, Florida's going to zone in on what they can do. They're not worried about what the Oilers can do. They're going to worry about playing defensively and making it hard. And at times, what I find with this Edmonton Oilers team is they start to like overextend themselves, right? They try to push for it more and more. And I think that's when the game will break down and Florida's going to get their chances if they can stick to their game plan. Because you know how it is. If they start to open it up, play run and gun with the Edmonton Oilers, look at the chances they start giving up. And it usually ends up in their back of the net. And a few of those other games where they did give up a lot of chances, in those games, you could have said Edmonton was the better offensive team. Bobrovsky was just the difference maker with how many high danger, like quality saves he made. So again, I think tonight, this is going to be on the Florida Panthers. If they can get that kind of game two at home where they played so well, they didn't give up a sniff. They gave up the first goal, and other than that, it was rock solid. I think that's what I kind of expect tonight here from Florida, but who the hell knows?
Yeah, who knows? It really is eerie how similar this is to the NBA championship where Boston goes up 3-0. They get smoked in game 4 on the road, then they win it in game 5. And it seems to be following that exact same route for the Stanley Cup Final. So game 5 in Florida, the Panthers hosting the Edmonton Oilers. Should mention as well, looking forward to next week, Huts, and the draft week show. At points in time, we've referenced it on today's show or this week's show, or this show in general, but we're going to be at Stadium Swim. At least I'm going to be at Stadium Swim. I'm sorry to say it, but we're going to be broadcasting. Well, I'm going to be broadcasting at Stadium Swim in Sin City next Tuesday to Friday. So we're going to have you covered draft-wise. I believe actually I'll be there Wednesday to Friday, but our coverage will start obviously on Monday. Exciting time for the company. I think a couple of us are going to be there, but from Stadium Swim at Circa in Vegas for draft week. I can't believe draft week's almost here, by the way. It feels like just yesterday the Leafs lost in game 7 at Boston in round 1.
I know it goes crazy. Even like July 1 closing in so fast with these guys still playing, right? You talk about some of these guys that are free agents in the Stanley Cup Final. This is a quick turnaround, right? For some of these players, especially now that the Cup Final is like pushed back so much. I do struggle with the date a little bit, like the fact that it's moved on so much. I understand what goes on, right? With media, with TV, with rights, and, trying to make the most money as possible. But even these 2-day breaks between games, it seems like after that Saturday game, like I just want to get back out there and see more. Not that I'm getting out there, but the fact of the matter is just seeing them play. So there's a little bit of time and it's exciting, right? That I feel like hockey's in a really, really good place. And I think for the NHL, they don't want this to end tonight. They'd rather keep this thing going, right? The amount of money they're making and things are in a good place. So it'll be interesting to see. And you being in Vegas is unreal. I would come, but I got a new puppy and I don't think I'm going to be allowed to leave.
And speaking of dogs, I got to clarify something in the chat. JC writes, Nick may know hockey, but I don't agree with him on the topic of dogs. For me, no point living if you don't have a dog. Look, I'm obsessed with my dog. I don't know what you gathered from that conversation to start this show, but I'm utterly obsessed with my dog, and we're obsessed with each other. I had nothing but great things to say about owning a pet. I was just clarifying when you're a parent, and I'm not even a parent, but when you're older, you come to the realization how expensive dogs are. That was all I was saying. Okay,
Yeah,
Huts?
I think having a dog got me ready to be a parent, honestly. The
Yeah, man.
responsibility and what comes with it, it's no joke. So, but
Screw every vet out there as well. I wanted to bring that up too. Also looking forward to July 1, the Daily Face-Off free agency special. I'm going to be on a panel. I'm sure you're going to do some stuff as well. July 1's around the corner. We're going to do a show, Daily Face-Off style, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time. Don't forget, after that, Rosie and I will get together for another edition of Leafs Morning Take. We're going to break down everything that transpires pertaining to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think it's going to be an active time. I mean, easy to say. It normally is this time of year, but especially in Leafs Nation, I think we're going to see a lot of movement here.
yeah, I'm going to be on that panel as well, helping out. I think breaking down some goalie movement, and this year more than ever, it looks like there's going to be a lot of guys changing teams and things going on. There's a lot of potential, and for the Leafs, I think they're in that market, right? I think there's going to be some movement here. They need a guy. Who's it going to be? Where do they fill those other depth positions? The Marner talks, there's just so much going on. It's an exciting time. I always kind of love free agency, just changing. I didn't necessarily love it when I was going through it at times, right? It can be a bit stressful and trying to make the right decision. I felt like when I had good years or bad years, whatever it was, there was just always that pressure of making the right decision, right? It comes on quick. So I think for some of these guys, it's going to be a busy time, especially with the landscape changing so fast and the playoffs. There's not like a big gap, right? Draft, free agency, everything happening quick. So it'll be a good time for the Leafs, and it'll be fun to break down.
Tammy writes in front of the show, cats are greater than rabbits, are greater than dogs, are greater than humans. So Tammy is a big-time cat fan here in the chat. Paul Zangari writes in, get pet insurance when they're young. I couldn't agree more with you. I could not agree more with you as somebody whose dog has glaucoma, by the way. My dog has one eye. I forgot to mention that, too. We had to take her eye out last fall. So we're learning, but we get so attached to our pets. We'll do anything for them. So looking forward to the Draft Week show, of course, from Stadium Swim as referenced, the free agency special courtesy Daily Face-Off. Don't forget, if you're watching right now, hit that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401, at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button as well. Leafs Morning Take. Wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. My latest piece earlier today, why extending Mitch Marner would be a brutal decision for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A conversation we've yet to have on this show. I'm kidding. The opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. Why don't we start there? Why don't you chime in on the info we were given yesterday, or the speculation, I guess, from Darren Dreger, suggesting Brad Treliving rather extend Marner than trade him. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's intimidating, right? I just think the fact of we've been down this road before, or is this something you get the deal done and it's more appealing to another team to be able to move them? I just think with this, the landscape of the NHL, what it's taught us over the last few years is you just can't win with offensively loaded teams, right? You need depth, you need decor, you need goaltending, and I think all the things that the Leafs lack, right? Again, I don't think you want to give away Marner for pennies on the dollar, and he's in a tough situation. I would assume anyone who's talked about Marner or is, kind of scratch that itch, it's going to be a tough take with, where he's at. But for me, honestly, I just don't understand how you can see his playoff value, what he's going to be demanding on a contract, come to fruition and help this team get over the hump to win a Stanley Cup. Because at the end of the day, that is the only goal now in Toronto, right? We've been a good team. We've dominated. We've showed potential, but we just haven't showed it come playoff time. And consistently, you look at all these teams that are getting the job done when it comes to Florida, it comes to Vegas, it comes to teams that have depth run, losing to the Bruins. The Bruins are a team that on paper, there's not really much sex appeal there other than Pasternak and Marchand, maybe McAvoy. They just seem to continually find guys to play the right way. So that's kind of my take on it. I just think but it's scary, honestly, Nick. I don't know what to think, and it's possibly going to happen here.
Yeah, it is. I think it's, fresh new day, so we'll see what takes come out today. But I think there's a variety of different ways to dissect this story. I think you're right. I just don't think you can go down the pathway of extending Marner because you have to acknowledge the previous administration and some of the mistakes they made. Honestly, you don't expect the John Tavares to enter the equation when it comes to free agency, but by my math, I think you look at Matthews, you look at Nylander, you look at Marner, you're going to be looking at paying three guys around what, 36, 37 million bucks. And I know the cap's going to 88 and soon to be at 92 and a half or 93, whatever they're speculating on that front. But that is like 33% of your salary cap going to three players. And everything you just mentioned, I just rather use that money to shore up other needs and solidify other roster spots. There's just so many holes on this roster. And to do it again and double down and triple down with these guys, I just don't think would be the smart decision in this scenario.
No, I don't think it is at all, Nick. And it's easy. I think the hardest part about this situation, truthfully, is the fact of letting him walk and then him having success somewhere else. I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing, like, for people to wrap their head around, right? There's really no winning that. Like, if he goes somewhere else and he dominates and they go, but he might be a better fit on a better team that has decor, that has a goalie that is solidified number one, where he can be protected a bit, where when there's only the three big pieces up front and you need some other key pieces, that money is better off spent somewhere else, in my opinion, because there's only so many seats at the table to create offense and score. And I'm also a big believer in Mitch Marner as well, in the sense of, like, guys like Mitch Marner just don't come around every day either, right? But it has to be the right fit at the right time. And I feel like throughout my career, I've seen this so many times. I've played with so many good players, whether it was defenseman, goalie, or forward, that just came up in the wrong organization, right? It just wasn't a fit. It didn't work out. It didn't make sense because of the other guys they had. And I feel like it's at a situation now where I think he needs to get out of here to go grow somewhere else. And at the same time, the Leafs need to part ways so they can grow to get to where they need to go.
Yeah, and there's going to be an element of risk, to your point. I understand when anytime a player of the ilk of Mitch Marner is in play, we'll say, potentially, there's always that risk that he goes somewhere and just becomes like even bigger than he already is. Like, I get it. I understand. And especially look at the track record of some of the players who have left this market and this team and say the last 5 to 7 years alone, a couple guys have won. I get it. But I think this is part of the job. There's risk involved. And I think right away you look at the Florida Panthers, you look at the Calgary Flames and that trade they consummated, where sometimes it doesn't go according to plan. Like, Jonathan Huberdeau was like a superstar player, 100-point plus player with Florida. By the way, that's a threshold Mitch Marner has never hit, is 100 points. He goes to Calgary, not the same player. And what's Jonathan Huberdeau known for? Being sort of soft. What's Mitch Marner known for? Being sort of soft. So I think you can't automatically say, oh, Marner's going to go here and be just an absolute stud and superstar. What if it goes the other way and Mitch Marner goes somewhere and he looks around and he's like, oh, there's no Nylander anymore. Oh, there's no Austin Matthews anymore. There's no John Tavares. Like, that's my question now, is like, if Mitch Marner goes to a team and he's the guy without anybody around him, is he the same Mitch Marner?
Yeah, that's the other side of it too, right? There's two sides to it. It's just the unknown is the intimidating factor, I think, for not necessarily probably management, because they're going to make a calculated decision on their numbers, analytics, where they see him at, especially knowing what goes on behind the scenes. I think from a fan base, that's the fear. The fear is he goes somewhere and he wins a cup, right? Kind of like I guess even like with the Buffalo Sabres, like the Jack Eichel being gone, winning a cup. Sam Reinhart potentially going to win a cup here too. I think the fact of like moving on from guys, their situation was a bit different. That relationship had really gone sour in the sense of the team didn't win. But same idea. It's hard, if a year from now, 2 years from now, the Leafs haven't done shit in the playoffs and Mitch Marner lifts a Stanley Cup. Trust me, that is going to sting a lot of people.
It would. JC writes in, Nick, is it 4 guys at over 40 million is one too many? Max 3 guys at 30 million. JC, my math is never great, but it's going to be over 30 million bucks. If you're paying Nylander 11.5, what is Matthews? 13.25, I believe.
Yeah.
Could double check that, but Marner's going to come in at 12.5. So do the math. It's not going to be 30 million bucks because Mitch, like, I don't understand that. Like, I do from market value. The player suggests that he's going to get more than Willie Nylander. But can you sit here with a straight face and say Mitch Marner deserves a penny more than Nylander? I can't.
No, I don't think so. Not the way that he has played, the way Nylander has answered the bell. And Nylander's been good in playoffs. He's produced. Yes, he missed a little bit of time this year. And the fact of the matter is, like, his playoff experience and the way he plays, like, what has this playoffs taught us again? Like, look at Alexander Barkov, and you talk about the Huberdeau to Chuck situation. like Huberdeau benefited from him, right? You talk about being with Austin Matthews, Nylander, but again, these are playoff players. You need guys that are big, rangy, shutdown guys as well with some offensive upside. Yes, they don't just grow on trees, but at Marner's size and his skill level, it just hasn't really got it done in the playoffs. And now you're going to spend that kind of money on a guy who can't get it done. It's definitely high risk. Unless it's like a sign and trade, you can get him at a decent number. I don't understand how this happens.
You know, I've been coming around to the idea that he could potentially come back next year, but the only caveat I would throw into that, there would be no way I'd even talk about extending him. I would just walk him to July 1. If that's the way you want to go out, you're not going to get your 8th year. You're going to get a 7-year contract with your new team. And that's going to be that, because part of me is like, okay, you know, they gave him the no movement clause. He wants to stay. I get that. I think part of me is like, hey, there's a possibility maybe Craig Berube can get something going, a fire burning in Mitch Marner. So you play that out and see what happens there. But I think the play, if he does go to next year and he isn't traded this summer, is to walk him to free agency, take that cap space and go do something with it. I don't know if you feel the same way. I understand why people on the other side of the spectrum, like, there's no way you can lose a guy that ilk for next to nothing, but I don't call it nothing, because I call it much needed cap space for this team.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a great point. Like sometimes rental guys at the trade deadline, when they're like, oh, why are we keeping them? We're going to lose them for nothing, or whatever goes on. You're not losing them for nothing. I agree that cap space is so valuable, especially a guy in this demand. Like we've kind of seen to the point, like now you have $10 million. What if you can make a trade or sign a defenseman, or you get that like star goalie to really, you could like for $12 million potentially, you could have a starting goalie and a stud defenseman, right? Which makes this team, in my opinion, a lot better when Mitch Marner year after year lets us down come playoff time, producing with, you know, you give him that money. And then when it matters most, yes, he's a unbelievable regular season player and he gets it done. But I think everyone's been through that before. You know, the term running it back, I think I get sick of hearing that, Nick.
This conversation would be so much more fun if Mitch Marner actually did something in the playoffs, wouldn't it? Like, I would be sitting here trying to figure out a pathway where it made sense to give Mitch Marner 12 and a half sheets a year over an 8-year contract. I look at the body of work. It's been long enough. In the core 4 era, it's been 6 seasons. They've won 1 playoff series. Mitch Marner and Matthews together has been longer, and they can't push through. And I can't sit here and justify paying another guy that much money. Again, when you add the sum of the parts and they've won 1 playoff series, it just makes no sense to me. So we'll see what transpires over the next couple weeks. I will say I've been coming around to the idea that Mitch Marner could be back next season. That's okay in my world, but I wouldn't even have a conversation about a contract. I don't care if he gets 20 points in the first 5 games of the season. Would not entertain that conversation. I think cap space is lucrative in this day and age, and I would love to see the Leafs spend that money elsewhere. But Dave Pagnotta, the 4th period as well, Huts disclosing that 4 teams have reportedly already been linked to Mitch Marner. We've talked about them already a bit, but the Golden Knights, the Blackhawks, the Stars, the Predators, where do you think is the best fit for Mitch Marner?
Like for me, honestly, you could touch on those teams. I think Nashville would be a good fit, right? Like just the fact of maybe you can get a goalie coming back, or if you get that trade. You know, the Blackhawks, I just don't really see the value in the Blackhawks adding a player like Mitch Marner, honestly, like where they're at right now in their development with guys. But, you know, maybe that is something that they see. I just think they're so offensively minded. I think they need to slowly grow. And the Golden Knights, I don't know how they make that happen, honestly. I feel like they're already so indebted and, you know, and the Stars, again, they have depth. I like the Preds, truthfully. I think that's a good fit. They have a decent back end. They have the goalie to come back. But at this point, I just feel like it's a matter of who and when something happens, you know, because if the signing happens, there's going to be uproar. And I just don't see this ending well, truthfully, of another year of this.
I don't think it's going to end well either way, because I think if you trade Mitch Marner, people are going to be pissed off that they don't think you got enough for Mitch Marner. If you sign him, the other side's going to be pissed off. I don't think there's a resolution that's going to appease anybody here, but I think Nashville would be the team for me too, just because I want UC Saros. And at this point, the Preds have made no indication this guy's actually available, but he is a year away from UFA. They do have obviously Askarov coming in between the pipes, and the Preds have been known to do this from time to time when it comes to passing the baton. But maybe in a perfect world, they just keep both netminders with Nashville. I sort of disagree on Chicago, because I think you almost owe it to the players and owe it to Connor Bedard to capitalize on his ELC. Like, this guy's making peanuts. His next contract, we all know this works. He's going to jump to 12, 13 million bucks just like that. You don't think they're going to sign him to an 8-year contract at ridiculous money? You're wrong. So I think you have to find a way to capitalize, extract a bit more juice financially, whether it's playing a couple extra playoff games. I think you have to go after it. And I think the prospects, if you're Mitch Marner, of playing with Connor Bedard for the next 8 years, I think would be very, very enticing, especially when you go from Matthews to Bedard. Never say never with Vegas as well, Huts. We laughed about this last week. How would Vegas make it work? We always ask that every time. Like, the Hurdle trade came out of nowhere. Pietrangelo signing. They just always seem to go for the new shiny toy. And that's why I think you could never discount Vegas. They're always thinking of ways to get better. There are players on that roster who make a lot of sense. Like Shea Theodore is 1 year away from UFA, making 5.2 next season. I think he would be on my radar if I'm the Maple Leafs. William Karlsson's another guy. Like, there's some pieces that would make sense. Even Dallas's back end intrigues me because of the younger guys like Thomas Harley, even Vegas with a guy like Nick Hague. Like, I'd want at least one defenseman back in a trade and maybe a forward and a draft pick. But that's a tough package to put together when you're not only bringing in a guy who makes 11.9 million or whatever it is, or 10.9, but you're also thinking that you're not just bringing him in for a one-off, you're bringing him in for a contract extension too, right?
Yeah, then you're committed to him, right? Especially not knowing. I feel like there's going to be some, like, people are going to be a little worried because of his playoff experience too, right? You talk about all those teams, right? Golden Knights are still in it. Stars, Predators just had a solid year. Other than the Blackhawks, obviously they're trying to improve and get better. I don't think
Yeah.
the Blackhawks see themselves as a playoff team by any means yet,
Yeah.
but trying to take a step forward. And now you're bringing in a guy that, his playoff resume is a bit to be desired, and you're giving him the keys to the castle, right? Because he's going to come with a big contract tag to get that. So I think that changes the dynamic of this trade where, like we talked about, is Toronto going to get their value back? But I also view another team like Florida Panthers, a team that has 3 draft picks on their team right now, because they've been aggressive and made trades and done things that, like, at times you're like, oh man, why are you doing that? And it's obviously worked out in their favor.
You have to be creative sometimes. So I'm sure behind the scenes they're mulling every single option. I'd love for a camera on the Leafs War Room, how they break down and analyze everything that's said on a daily basis, whether they're extending Mitch Marner, they're definitively trading Mitch Marner, they're keeping Mitch Marner. Every scenario has been discussed in the last 3 weeks alone. I think it's an indication to the organization what it's going to be like if Mitch Marner comes back and the soap opera continues in the next season. Every day, there's going to be a throng of media members just asking the question, what's going on with Mitch Marner? But certainly, we all anticipated this type of conversation. There's a lot of people in the chat, by the way, and I've seen you for weeks. I do agree. John Tavares doesn't take much blame in this market. Why is that the case, in your opinion, Huds?
I think because he's just a Swiss Army knife, right? Like, he's responsible in the sense of, I feel like Mitch Marner just carries a lot more load offensively, right? It's like expected of him. And, Tavares, I think, is just accepted as that leader that's going to grind it out. And he doesn't play that flashy game. He just gets to the net, tips pucks, does his job. And he's very reliable in that sense. So I think he wins fans over with, like, the simplicity of his game, where sometimes Mitch Marner has that flash and he can create so much with his play. I think people get upset at that at times because has more a tendency to turn pucks over, trying to make a fancy move at his own blue line or in his D zone or at the offensive blue line. So I feel like that comes with a little more, just criticism in the sense of the way he plays, where at times Tavares is easier to simplify his game so it doesn't look as blatant if he isn't playing as well. That's like my personal take on it.
Yeah, no, that's fair because, again, I have a lot of conversations specifically with family members in Quebec, and they always bring up the fact, like, why does Mitch Marner take the brunt of the focus when there's other guys who have struggled? And it's a pretty easy answer. More times than not, I notice Willie Nylander in the playoffs. More times than not, Austin Matthews does something of consequence in the Stanley Cup playoffs that betters a team. John Tavares, weirdly enough, has had some moments. You even look at that first-round series against Boston. All 3 of those guys I just mentioned had moments. Who didn't have a moment? Mitch Marner.
Mitch Marner. I agree. And I feel like sometimes playing with glitz and glamour is great and having the skill, and it's unbelievable what he can do on a hockey rink. But when you're, like, committed to that brand of hockey, it's hard when you're having an off night, right? It's the same thing as, like, being a 5th or 6th defenseman. Sometimes you can just settle in and chip pucks off the glass, and you, like, a good night for a player of that caliber in a sense is no one even notices you. That's like where you want to be. When you're Mitch Marner and you're not being noticed, you're not doing your job, right? And that is the cross he bears. And at times it's unbelievable to watch, and not like trying to undermine who he is as a player. Like, he's an unbelievable hockey player. Like, I get that. Trust me, I have so much respect for Mitch Marner and what he can do. But we're in the business of winning Stanley Cups, and he is a guy that his game right now does not translate to help in the NHL playoffs. And it's just something that at this point, like, how many times do you keep beating your head against the wall here and getting the same results?
Yeah, but do you think Craig Berube can tap into that? I guess that's what the Leafs are asking right now, right?
I don't think Craig Berube has to tap into his individual skill, in my opinion. I think Craig Berube is going to do a better job of finding a way to get this team, like this cohesive unit, to like play together and become more of a team and set more of a culture. And I don't necessarily think that he's going to be able to like just change Mitch Marner's game to translate to a playoff hockey, to make him more grittier in the offensive zone, to find ways to generate offense come playoff time. In my personal opinion, I played for Craig. He's a great guy. I think he's better for the whole unit of all. I don't understand how he's going to change Mitch Marner's individual skill to make him benefit come playoff time.
Maybe he disciplines him, right? Elliot Friedman came on this show last week and sort of alluded to the fact that maybe Sheldon Keefe, it was difficult for him to discipline Mitch Marner. That's why he always focused on Willie Nylander, and that'll be something to document under Chief here. Craig Berube is the relationships fostered. Like, who's going to be his Calle Yarncroke? Who's going to be some of his favorites? Who's going to be some guys that he really comes hard down on in the media? Like, is it going to be Mitch Marner? Is it going to be Nylander? Is it going to be Austin Matthews? I think early on it's going to be fascinating to document from that standpoint, but nevertheless, it is a polarizing conversation in this market. Dave Pena also noting that the Leafs are open to dealing Timothy Liljegren. I'll spare you that conversation because I know you guys had it on Thursday, so we'll see what happens on that front as well as we get closer and closer to the NHL draft. But there's no question the Leafs are looking to overhaul that blue line. I just wonder if Liljegren's going to factor into their long-term plans here. And should mention as well, Dean Chenoweth, who the Leafs parted ways with last week, headed to Winnipeg to join Scott Arniel's staff. What do assistant coaches do behind the scenes? Because for me, it's so difficult to analyze the job any of these guys have done. Guy Boucher, we know he ran the power play, but what does he truly do on a daily basis? Chenoweth, Manny Malhotra goes to the Vancouver Canucks organization, now coaching their American Hockey League team. Can you describe some of the duties behind the scenes of the assistants and the associates?
More like they're more or less like players coaches, right? They're going to be more involved in like sideline conversations, little tweaks here and there. Some guys will run penalty kill, power play, right? And they're going to run those individual meetings. The general team meeting is going to be run by the head coach with some insight from those guys. But I think at times they're more the bridge to the head coach, right? Head coaches nowadays, when I first started, it was definitely like the head coach was up here. You never really had conversations with him as much, right? Where now players want to get to know their coach, but in that factor, the assistant coach are kind of like your buffer zone. Like, say if something's going on during a game, there's a little bit of that. Even practice time, they can kind of vent, get to where you're at. And at times, assistant coaches are just there to run practice and like bag guys too, extra players, keep them in shape, run them through drills where the head coach goes out, runs practice, then he's off. Assistant coaches are there, more engaged with the players on the rink. So they do a well dynamic. And then behind the scenes, so much video, right? Like, there's going to be guys that break down. Everybody does video. So a lot of times a head coach, if we're going into a series, he's going to ask for, I want the power play, I want their forecheck, I want all their neutral zone clips, right? And he's going to go through, the video coach is going to get all those, give them to the assistant coach. And then whether you're the D coach or forward coach, he's going to break down a bunch of clips and get you ready for the matchup we have coming, where the head coach now gets all those clips that have been filtered down. He watches those, goes through, and then if you're doing a pre-scout, say the morning of, or say example for the Oilers and Florida, probably yesterday they did a little video session about game 4. They just went over some tendencies. They see some adjustments that they saw and some things they're going to make. And the assistant coach would be the guy that goes guy to guy, making sure that everybody's on the same page, where the head coach is going to kind of oversee the whole group. So the assistant coach does a lot. And I think the head coach really relies on the assistant coach to be his backbone and kind of have his feelers in the team.
How many do you need, though? Because the Leafs have 2 right now, but I asked that this organization always has a bevy of executives, assistants, On the bench last year, they had like 4 guys. Do you think they need one more guy, maybe specifically for a power play? Like, I'm just trying to wonder if they're going to add one more guy behind the bench here.
I don't know. Maybe the Leafs have so many coaches. I remember when I was with them, kind of retiring. Me and Matt
Yeah.
Murray had this conversation the other day at the golf course. Just how many coaches there are in Toronto. Sometimes it's nuts, right? I think it's different with like a veteran player, like myself when I was there. I was kind of at the end of my career. I knew the writing was on the wall. I was
Yeah.
toast, and so I wasn't pulled by it. But like if you're a young guy and you have, I remember the Black Aces there. There was about 6 or 7 coaches on the ice, a skating coach, a shooting coach, all these different coaches. Like there's a lot of pressure all of a sudden in that. Like every rep you do, someone's like, "Hey, well, you got to do this." Where I feel like at times you need to give guys a leash. So I think Craig Chief will do a better job of just like denoting, like, "Hey, there's a time and a place to step on the gas." So there's a I don't think you need that many coaches on the bench. Truthfully, like 3 is a lot, even 4. But I think that's going to come down to what Craig Berube wants and how he wants to run his team. Like when I was in St. Louis, Steve Ott was up in the press box, which I liked. He would come down. He was kind of the eye in the sky. So I think that's an important factor, especially getting that view from up top changes your opinion on a hockey game. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think more is always better when it comes to coaching.
I believe Manny Malhotra was the eye in the sky this year, and of course now off with Abbotsford in the American Hockey League. So we'll see if they add one more guy. I'm curious to see who runs that power play. I wonder who the pinpoint for that job. Is it Lane Lambert who's already there? Mike Van Ryn's a former defenseman in this league, so maybe it's Lane Lambert who's running that power play. Only time will tell on that front. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. What do you like tonight, Huts?
I don't know what I like tonight, buddy, but I want to keep this party going. So I'm taking the Oilers money line, and I'm taking the Oilers to score first because I just think, like, let's keep this train rolling. I don't want to give up yet. I want to see this thing go the distance.
We're comboing. I'm going to go against you, dude. I think Florida wins the Stanley Cup tonight. I think they're definitively the better team. You can throw your stats out the window. I was in Edmonton. It was 3-0 Oilers, and everybody's telling me how this series should be closer than it was. Well, I could tell you the Florida Panthers won the first 3 games of the series, and to think that Edmonton's going to win 4 in a row against the best team in hockey this year, it's just a tall order. I don't care if, Connor McDavid or Wayne Gretzky are there. I think it's just going to be a tough task, and I think we're going to see a better Florida team tonight, so I think they win the Cup. I would pinpoint the under in that game, and I'm going to play a Matthew Tkachuk anytime goal. He has been very, very quiet in this series. He has 1 point through like 4 games.
Yeah, he had a good look last game. Skinner made a good save on him off his shoulder, and he's around the net. He's, the thing I love about Matthew Tkachuk, even when they do like the behind the scenes and you hear him talk in the dressing room, this guy is so dialed into winning a championship right now, and I respect that a lot. You can just tell that he wants this and he's a leader, and I think he puts it out there every day. So yeah, it's going to be good. I think I'm betting with my heart here just because I want to see this keep going. But honestly, this is randomly a year where I don't even mind who wins, truthfully, right? Like, because I feel like I have friends on the Florida Panthers and I cheer for people that I have good relationships with. But at the same time, if the Oilers were to come back, it'd be kind of historic. So, but for Sam Reinhart and Kyle Okposo, guys that I, became pretty close with, it'd be pretty cool to see them lift the Stanley Cup tonight.
Yeah, and again, it's tough because I picked Florida, but obviously, my bud Adam Henrique's on the Oilers. It'd be cool to see him win the Cup. I caught up with some of his family members in Edmonton. They're just so jacked to be there. It's been 13 years between Cup appearances for Rico. Scores last game, which is pretty damn cool to see. Scores a second goal, ends up being the game winner in the 8-1 rout of Florida. But I just think definitively the Panthers are the better team. And we'll see if they can close it out. They always say the last one's the toughest to get, right?
Yeah, I think so. Closing them out. And you could see it last game. I think no matter what series you are, and especially now, you start thinking about you're going down for your pregame nap and you start thinking about lifting the Stanley Cup. It's hard to park those thoughts, right? And I think there's a team that can do it. I think it's Florida, but this is a big game though. Like you do not want to have to go back to Edmonton, in my opinion.
You don't. Excellent job today, Huts. I believe we'll talk later on this week or even next week. So great stuff, bud.
No problem, buddy. Thanks for having me on as always. It's nice to be back on my side. Hosting, way too much pressure for me. I'm always a better backup.
Hey, I heard you smashed it, by the way. That was a relief appearance on Thursday. I heard you smashed it. I haven't caught the show yet. How'd it go?
I don't know. We'll see. I got a few texts from a few people saying I was decent, but what do people say to your face? Then we're going to tell you the bad stuff.
Yeah, people tell me I'm good. I'm like, no, I don't think they're talking crap behind my back. But appreciate you stepping up large last Thursday. Looking forward to the rest of the week leading up to the draft. And then free agency. So thank you, everybody in the chat. The dog chat was great today at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Again, don't forget to visit the LeafsNation.com. Jay Rosehill back in the mix tomorrow. For Carter Hutton, I'm Nick Alberga. Thank you to producer Vic as well. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.